If you're scaling a business today, AI and technology are on your leaders list. If not, you're in trouble. Today on the leaders list, we've invited Michael Daoud from Visus. He's a veteran consultant in the technology space that helps people understand how to invest in technology today and still make it valuable down the road. In other words, how do you future-proof your technology investments? I'm Bryon Morrison. Let's get to the leaders list. Michael Daoud, thank you for joining the leaders list today.
My pleasure, Bryon. It's good to be here with you.
Yeah, it's good to see your face. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this subject of future-proofing technology is because you have this innate ability to understand how to solve short-term problems and still balance long-term goals. And I'm just curious, like, where did that come from? Is that just something you were born with, or did you cultivate that over time?
It's interesting you say that, right? So if I go back to my youth, I was always interested. My mom had started me as a young child solving puzzles. And I think a lot of that translates to technology. You typically have a problem and you have to solve it. It's like a puzzle. And I was also, as a young person, I always thought of myself as an inventor. So I loved coming up with innovative solutions to problems. And I think when you put those two things together, just solving a puzzle and then you're inventing, the next question is how do you build something that's going to last? It's not just for tomorrow, right? You're not just prototyping a throwaway solution, but you're putting together a solution that has value for years on out. Obviously, with technology, things need to be swapped out at some point technology-wise, but if you've got a really good solution that's well thought out, well architected, typically those things provide a lot more value. And naturally, I'm always thinking ahead. So I think that parlays into putting together some really good forward-looking solutions.
Well, it's not something that, I always wonder about whether people are taught that or whether it's just inside them from day one. But it sounds like that's kind of in the DNA and then grown as a skill set too. So
yeah.
And you've had 20 plus years to hone that skill in Visus. So why don't we keep digging a little bit on you, and why don't you tell us a little bit about Visus and what you guys do?
Sure. So we celebrated 30-year anniversary last year.
Wow, that's awesome.
The first several years at Visus, I was on my own as a consultant and learned the business and different aspects of the business, and then grew it organically from there. So basically, Visus, we're a technology consulting firm. We have a focus on digital transformation, and we're known for our deep expertise in tailored digital solutions, right? If it's complex websites, complex applications, we help organizations streamline their operations, and we like to elevate the customer experience. And we do that through some innovative web development, scalable cloud solutions, and then actionable business intelligence and data projects, right? Kind of try and couple all those together, which provide us with great solutions for our clients. And now we're delving into AI.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you guys, it's interesting because you work with lots of different types of companies, but there's a commonality of innovation and real serious problem solving. And that's why I just thought this would be great for us to be able to talk about. Tell me a little bit about, after 30 years, so what stage would you say you are in your business?
I'm still only like 45 years old. So
exactly. Yeah. It's amazing how you've gone backwards in time, but the business still keeps moving forward. That's great.
When you're in the technology business, you're always growing and evolving, right? So in this particular time, it's an interesting stage, right? Because we're always adding to our technical know-how. We're always learning about the new systems that are out there to provide the right solution to every client. But at this stage, I think we're at a interesting stage of truly pivoting into AI, which is on everybody's minds, but also how to implement it, how to use it. So there's a lot of AI-assisted tools out there that people can leverage in their companies, starting with the easiest answer, ChatGPT. but there's also AI-enabled solutions, and that's what we're pivoting into. So in our stage right now, it's that growth that can come from AI and delivering those AI-centric solutions. So I just got back a few weeks ago from the Microsoft Build conference, and then the majority of the conference, which was 3 days up in Seattle, was all about AI. And probably most people listening to this podcast have heard the words agentic AI, where you can create agents to orchestrate them to do different tasks autonomously or with some human assistance when needed. And that's I think where I see a tremendous amount of growth and potential to help companies, organizations be a lot more efficient operationally, but also create a competitive advantage for themselves by leveraging this technology.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a seismic shift in business and so many other places. So it's a perfect time for companies to, if AI is not on their leaders list as a consideration or something that they're trying to figure out, they're in a little bit of trouble. But I always like to understand what's on, real leaders. You're a founder, CEO. What are some of the things that are on your leaders list right now? What are some of the top priorities as you're going through that change and managing through that stage?
Right. Well, what I realize this is a big change, right? So we've got an awesome team at Visus that deliver just exceptional solutions for clients, and we thrive on creating really good solutions as well. But as you said, the AI piece is a seismic shift, right? You can use AI in what recent terms come up, which is called vibe coding. So as you're coding, you can use AI to help your coding. Mm-hmm. But to truly create AI first solutions requires a different kind of mindset and understanding of the new landscape. And so what I realize is that it takes effort to move there, to switch gears. And so we're doing it internally, but it's not a flip a switch, hey, we're developing AI solutions tomorrow. It's incremental, day in, day out, working with it. And I think to those that are really good in development, will come back that I didn't expect it, but I've had some team members say, hey, this is going to take away my value on the vibe coding piece. My value is really creating some great coding, for our solutions to support it. This vibe coding is going to reduce my value to you and our clients. And I kind of flipped it on its head to empower them a little more and say, look, I look at this, at least on the vibe coding piece, as helping you accelerate to provide more value to the client, right? Having you think through more than one scenario at once or quickly to be able to provide more value. But I think the big one out there is how to truly create AI first solutions. And so we're pivoting into that, but it requires just like any other change management. You have to constantly be at it. It's not a one-time thing, go and do it and you're done.
Yeah. When I think about a business like yours, being able to, absorb this massive shift, but then also be able to take care of the day to day, that's a huge challenge for every leader. How do you balance working on the business and in the business?
That's a great question. Some of it doesn't require technology. It's more sometimes a skill about how do you delegate more, how do you delegate better, right?
Yeah.
And that's also a learned skill as well, which I've been trying to teach myself and do, and I'm seeing wonderful results by doing it. And it comes to a point where you can do more and more of that to trust your team, to let go and really work on the big vision and strategy. So I can't say that I'm there yet, but I'm working towards it. And when it does work, it feels really, really good.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. And I always ask the questions, even though you're, giving us your expert opinion on how people can help this big challenge they have in their leaders list. It's fair to open up and talk about like what we deal with as leaders as well. And so, everybody knows that it's battle tested, right? This isn't coming from somebody that, read it in a book and that's the best they can offer. So thanks for going through that. So now let's talk about those other leaders who have this issue of they're thinking about AI, they know it's coming. They're also thinking about just what does technology and IT mean in my organization now, right? Like all of those things are starting to change. And so this is one of those times where it's a pivotal time for us to think about, what am I going to invest in technology? How do I do that? And most importantly, how do I do that in a way that I can kind of future proof that investment? Are there frameworks or principles that you apply every time that help you evaluate, how do I solve the immediate need, but still think about the long-term value?
There's a piece of how do leaders invest, and I think that's the key word. With AI right now, it's on every leader's mind, even if they don't fully understand how AI could be enabled. But I think just considering some investment on that is important to figure out what it is that they can do with AI, right? So if we think about that on its own, they can today just start enabling their team members to leverage AI with things as simple, and most likely most of them are doing it, although there's some, depends on the organization and sensitivity of data. Some have some barriers to be able to use like things like ChatGPT at work. But if you can overcome those barriers, like for us, I mean, even our project managers, our accounting department, they're all using ChatGPT to help them solve problems. And those are kind of, they become linguistic problems to some extent, but also decision factor problems and how to position things to talk about something. Those are all kind of idea innovation type of tools. So I think on a very low level, leaders can enable their team members to do that. But then comes, and that's if you want the full powered one, well, the $20 one, it starts free. $20 is not a big deal. You can go up to $200 a month if you want the operator version. But then you should look and work with IT, as you said, right? IT for a long time, and can still be in some companies, be looked at as a cost center, right? Keeping the lights on, make sure our servers are on, make sure everybody's got a good laptop or workstation, make sure the internet's working, VPNs, all that stuff, infrastructure is working, right? But I think leaders, especially the ones that have IT departments, but the ones that don't, can talk to their IT consultants with how do they leverage IT and technology in general to truly be a competitive advantage for themselves, right? So the first layer, and I was on an AI panel a few weeks ago, and I've shared with everybody, the lowest hanging fruit as a leader in looking at AI is operational efficiency. How can I do more with less, right? That's the low hanging fruit that everybody can take advantage of. Every business has bottlenecks, manual processes, things that are not well integrated. You can leverage AI tools to help with those things, right?
You know, one thing, not to interrupt you, Michael, but one of the things that I see all the time is we say we have manual processes, or we have, easy efficiencies we can gain. And what I tend to find is a lot of organizations haven't done the homework to allow them, like they haven't mapped their processes, or they aren't aware of what all of their processes are. So, when I talk to people about AI, I talk to them first about, do you know the process? Is it mapped? And can you identify where those easy efficiency points can be gained? But I agree with you 100%. It's just sometimes that comes back to the point that sometimes it's human, sometimes it's technology.
Well, sometimes it's evident too. And this is a non-pre-AI type of problem that we solved, where we had a client that was processing orders. They were in the medical supplies business, and they're processing orders every month, but they're from two cloud systems that didn't talk to each other, or hadn't talked to each other yet. And so they had a person working every day, downloading data from one, massaging the data, working on it, combining data, and then uploading into the other one to fulfill the order. What they recognized is there was a limit to how many orders they could process, and they wanted to triple that amount per month, and that would not be possible. Even if you had another person, there was just a limit on the amount of data you can download and have different people work on it. So, a simple solution, that was an evident operational bottleneck that technology came in and put in the right hooks to each system, added the human rules on how to massage the data, how to combine it properly so that it's constantly processing orders, and we set them up so they could triple the amount. Now imagine you could do that with AI too today very easily using different tools. But you have to feel the pain of the problem, or take the time to say where are opportunities, right? What are
Yeah,
the
yeah, you're
examples
right.
now?
So that was the low-hanging fruit that you were talking about in the easy investment, right? As efficiencies. Yeah.
Now, I think the strategic one that's going to differentiate the leaders and the winners from the rest of the crowd are the ones that are going to look at and say, how can I leverage AI into my product or my service that it becomes part of the offering? It's not just the back office stuff that it's helping me save money and time,
Hmm.
but it's the customer facing product or service that's making me different than my competitors, so that I can give them a competitive advantage and also have a competitive advantage by embedding AI in my product or service.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So it's the classic story of efficiency and strategy.
Yes.
Um, but even if we're not talking about AI, just technology in general, how do you examine that and make sure that, like, can you future proof all of your tech investments?
I think to a certain extent you can, depending on the technology that you use, right? So let's say right now you're going to the cloud because you have it all, you still have, believe it or not, there's companies still with their own data centers and servers to
Yep.
manage. So you can future proof yourself by moving to the cloud. That's an easy answer, right? When it comes to specific solutions, those you can future proof by thinking through the solution, not only for the problem you're trying to solve today, tomorrow, but maybe a year or two from now. You may know that in a year or two, your business may change, your customers' expectations may change. They don't need it today or tomorrow, but it's coming. And you can be future proofing that solution independent of the technology by creating the right solution and the right architecture that will support you not only immediately, but also in the future. And I think that's one thing um, that has allowed us to serve our customers well, is by looking at the entire landscape. When they work with us, they'll immediately tell us about the problem today, and we'll say, okay, how will that problem change in a year from now? Will you need to support a different type of customer within this solution? Yes. Okay, great. We don't have to build out the whole solution for that, but we can set up the foundation architecture to future proof it, right? So let's say you want to build a house, and right now you're just going to go for your first level, but in the future you want to add a second level as your family expands. It's good to know that when you're building the foundation, so it could support that second level, rather than
Yep.
just building a foundation for one. You're like, oh, sorry, I can't do that. And it's simple by asking the right questions and looking down the road for a year or two down the line. And talk about that foundation will be the right foundation, even though the building materials may change of what you're going to build with in 2 years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does because what that underscores is the importance of understanding the vision for the company also.
100%.
And that's really challenging right now for a lot of companies. So what happens if I don't know if I'm going to need a second story or if I'm going to need 10 stories? Like that's where it gets really, really challenging in my mind. Do you have a thought on how you approach that for companies that really don't know how to tell you what the future is going to look like?
That's actually a very good and difficult question to answer,
Yeah.
because you can't build a solution or a foundation towards something you don't know about that it's supposed to, uphold and support down the line. But I think that may be the moment when leaders need to say, where do we want to be a year or two from now? And
Yeah.
take the time to think through that a little bit to help support it, not only that solution, but probably their business overall.
Yeah, it's like we were talking about earlier, right? The human condition, like you have to apply that's where AI is not going to take our jobs when it comes to understanding what my long-term vision is, what my values are, why those support those and align with each other, and how I can bring along the entire group with, the clients that understand that too.
Yeah.
It really is an important time to step back. And I just was reading something from a friend of mine, Ben Gaddis, just wrote about, you know, if we're thinking about how do we really get irrational right now and think about what's possible, the smartest thing may be to actually slow down. because everybody is screaming about AI and trying to just plug in AI to everything. And the reality is then you're just burning cycles and you're not really thinking strategically about what could this be if I wanted to back up and really change my business or take advantage of what's happening right now.
Yeah,
and I just think that's it's an interesting time, right? Because the buzz is so loud we can't hear anything else.
Right.
So in terms of when you start talking to these companies and they say, okay, I know I'm going to need a second floor, and so we're going to change the foundation or we're going to build it differently so that it'll support that in the future. What are the kinds of telltale mistakes that you see over and over again? Like, say they've given you the vision, what is the mistake that they make in then implementing or letting you do your job?
I think the biggest mistake I see out there is when people don't want to take the time to pause and put a good plan together. I've seen companies sometimes they're driven by the urgency of time.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, they end up compromising and say, I just want a solution to meet this date because that date was set, and not doing it properly. In our industry, there's something called the SDLC, the software development lifecycle. First parts of that lifecycle are planning and design. And if you don't do those things, right, you jump right into development, you potentially will probably have a quick and nice solution, but it'll quickly fall apart when you're trying to scale or expand or change things, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a short-sightedness sometimes I see, and it's unfortunate because you're just buying for today and tomorrow, not beyond. And so it actually ends up costing more to do it right the second time than to do it right the first time, right? When, I was talking to a team member earlier this morning, and I thought it was a great analogy. He said, if you assemble an orchestra and you can have the greatest musicians together for the orchestra, but they don't have a song sheet to follow, with all the notes, how do you get them, playing together towards the right outcome? And it's the same thing here. You can have great technologists, but if you don't have the right strategic plan of what you need to build now, but also later, and that everybody can come around and participate in easily, you may have, as I said, a short-term solution, but not a long-term solution. So that planning design phase is so critical to the success of projects, no matter how simple. It goes really, really a long way.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because I was going to ask you, do you think future-proofing at all times? Or is there a place for, I just got to solve this problem and let's move on and we'll fix it right later?
Yeah.
Agile versus SDLC, right?
Well, even in Agile, I think you want to be, future-proofing and thinking ahead. But I think, when you're about to start a project, right, that's the time to take a step back, look at it, make sure you're planning it properly. And it is an investment, right? Sometimes people shy away, I don't want to pay for planning and design to get an estimate of what the build's going to be. Well, I always tell people, if your friend came to you and said, hey, I got a contractor to build me a house, and your first question is, what are the plans like? No, I didn't get an architect. I don't need plans. Your eyes are probably going to pop out and say, are you sure you want to build a house without a set of plans and an architect? Right? Who would do that? You'd have like a catastrophe on your hands or something that just doesn't stand up. It's the same thing in software, right? We can get away with a lot more of that in software because it's hard to see those things and you can see things that work, but eventually it catches up. And so I think that would be, if there's any takeaway from doing this for 30 years over and over, it's doing those first couple of steps that really make something last a long time. I remember we did a solution for the county of Santa Barbara, talk about future proofing. It was to do agenda for the board of supervisors, right? This is going back to the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. I think they ended up using that solution for probably 11 or 12 years. And it was just thought out enough, and they were able to upkeep some older servers to keep the software going, right? By having a good solid solution that delivered what they needed to, right? But that took some time to think about it and design it up front.
Man, that is such a great example. I mean, 10, 11, years for software that's a very, very long cycle. But How do you deal with people today who, there's a mindset of AI, test and learn, move as fast as possible, keep, break things. How do you live in that environment where you know that there's a better way, but there's just it's a mindset thing, right? Just
Yeah.
getting them to understand, like, how do you settle them down to show them that it makes sense to, like you said, to slow down and get it right the first time.
Hmm. I think that comes down to education. And look, not everybody's open to it, depending on whatever factors and pressures they have upon themselves. But typically, I think those that think through it realize how important that step is, especially if they're looking to have it as an investment for the long term, rather than just meet a deadline that was put together by management, or board, or shareholders, or whoever it is. So, so I don't think it's a 100% success rate even when you explain it. But I think when you do, probably 70-80% of people get that. Now, going back to that example of that solution that was 10, 11 years, I think even 12, that's hard to do these days because technology is changing so fast.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to upkeep with security vulnerabilities and library updates and changes like that are moving way faster than they were like back then. And so I think that's another piece that shareholders, stakeholders, leaders need to keep in mind, is that you don't just build it and it's done. You build it and you keep improving upon it and updating it and supporting it, so it's keeping up with the times. And that's an important mindset to have, because that's just the nature of things these days, right? You have this piece of software that's embedded in the solution. Okay, the manufacturer says there's security vulnerability. Well, are you willing to live with that risk or plug it up, right? And so that's an important piece to keep in mind.
So in this environment where everything is changing, say you're talking to a CEO that's running a company, 250, 500 employees, SMB that's getting ready to break out and move into small enterprise. Technology for an organization like that, should they be building large-scale foundational software solutions? Or should they be thinking in a modular fashion? Should they be thinking about platform first and using platform technologies that are out there, or building custom? I'm always curious about, like, I know it's always unique to every company, but if you're thinking about that specific SMB that's growing and scaling, how would you approach that?
So that's the key word: growing and scaling, right? If they're not growing and scaling, then they don't have that pressure to keep up with the demand. And so they have more leeway to stay the same, shift a little bit here and there. But if you're growing and scaling and you're not keeping up with the demand, that could hurt you. And so in those scenarios, and we've been in those scenarios with clients that we're growing and scaling, the decision making has to be somewhat rapid, but you got to keep in mind that you're building something that's going to keep up with your growth and scale, not just what you're seeing today.
Yeah.
And then, are you going to, use a platform, build your own solution? You never want to build something that already exists. You want to build it because it's going to provide value to you, a competitive advantage. It becomes an asset to your company. But with good reason, because whatever's out there is going to cost you more or doesn't allow you to conduct business the way you want to conduct it. So typically there is a stage where you kind of look at the landscape of what's out there to solve the problem you're going through with growth and scale. And does it meet your needs or not? If it doesn't, then you say, okay, how do I build my own? I mean, there's a reason why developers exist, right? They're not just building products for companies that sell, but they're building products for companies to use, either internal or through a company like ours that gets outsourced to, right, to build it right. And those become competitive advantages. So there's not a one answer to answering that question, Bryon. It's literally, what's needed, what's out there, and would it fit our needs or not? And that's when you can say, okay. And there's some solutions where it's a little bit of a hybrid. You buy something off the shelf and you customize it to your needs as well.
Yeah. And that's, I've seen you and Visus do that. And I think it's cool to be able to, I know some organizations that are so hardcore, we only develop, our own stuff or create product. And then there's other groups that look, I'm just an integrator. I'll plug in the software, and you guys do such a great job of not caring. It's not ego. It is just what's the right solution. And that's more of a cultural mindset, right? I mean, to be able to flex between platforms and hybrid solutions or custom when necessary.
100%. And one of the ways that we do that is through technology strategy workshops, to come in and work with the management team, with the stakeholders, and say, okay, what is your vision? What are your current pain points? Where are you trying to get to? Mm-hmm. How do you get there? Building a roadmap for that and identifying, can you use a platform? Can you use a custom solution? A little bit of both, right? And I think if leadership's open to that, then they could see all the available things at hand. Because I've seen the companies that say, oh, we don't do development, we don't customize, we just buy off the shelf. Mm-hmm. That's easy to do. But what the downside to that, the upside, it's easy. The downside is it doesn't give you any competitive advantage to your competitors who are probably using the same or similar systems. So then you're just competing on your product or service and you're not leveraging technology. But as soon as you step into how can I leverage the technology I'm enabling for my company to allow me to perform better, have a competitive advantage, that's when you start connecting the dots and say, okay, even though I may have the same systems as other competitors in my industry, because there's in some industries, it's like there's not too many choices, right? If you're creating a certain type of product, there's a certain product that supports that. You have the same system as your competitor. But then how do you leverage the data and the processes from that system with something else to give you that advantage to either do it faster, better, right? That's, I think, the goal that comes out of technologies, to look beyond the systems that you have to leverage them for yourself.
Yep. I'm going to circle back. I asked you in the very beginning, like, is there a framework that you use? And I think you guys do have a pretty interesting methodology that you use. Can you talk a little bit about that? Just how you take somebody through that strategy aspect that you were just talking about?
Yeah, so we have something that you can find on our website. It's called the 4D process. And the first D is define. What's the problem? Let's define the problem you're trying to solve. The second D is design. And sometimes people get that mixed up, like, oh, what are the graphics going to look like? No, we're talking about architectural design, system design, plus the user interface. The third D is development, and the fourth D is deployment, and then followed by support. That process has really helped us tremendously in helping our clients achieve the goals that they want to achieve. We have been talked to in the past of skipping sometimes the first D, but the first D sometimes it's just a 3-4 hour conversation. But the second D, oh no, I've got screenshots of this. Just go ahead and we have scars from those projects because even because part of our process in that second D, the design, is not just coming up with the user interface and the architecture, but it's the technical specs. So that when you tell a developer build this, right, they can look at a picture of some graphics designer, beautiful page, oh, you've got buttons here, all that. But it doesn't tell you the logic that if you hit this button, it should update this record and trigger this thing to happen and all that. And so those technical specs that go along with that interface are critical to get the right thing done. And then when you go to test your solution, you have something to reference, and so does the client. When you're just using pictures, people start reasoning, well, I told, this button is supposed to do that. Well, I don't remember that. Or the developer says, well, how do I know that? But when you have the specs with you, then the tester, the developer, the client, everybody's on the same page. And that is a key piece that has made us successful in our process. And if I were to give one piece of advice for anybody out there that's working with their IT team or other outsourced companies, make sure you're getting the right specifications for you to validate that they're going to give you what you need and have peace of mind as they're building it, right? Going back to architectural drawings for a house. If you don't know where that door is, or does that door swing in or out, can you imagine if every door in the house swung out because you didn't have papers that said it should swing into the room, right? That'd probably drive you crazy. It's like, those are the details that are important when you build software. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Simple example.
What I think is interesting about you guys, though, is you downplayed define. And I think that's actually where you're really great, because you push when somebody says this is the issue, that might be just a short-term issue. But I think that's where you expand that knowledge, and awareness of what they're really trying to solve. Because sometimes the problem is not the thing that they
Yeah.
defined themselves. And then the other thing about that I like is what's the fourth D for support?
Deployment, which is
Deployment.
also support.
So you're thinking about, like, how are you going to continue to support this process? So that does speak to what do we solve in the very beginning, but you know that you're going to have to live with this ongoing. And so it's not just like, let's just get it launched. It is, how are we going to continue to support, or how are you going to continue to support that software over time? So I just thought that was a great perspective. And so it's kind of baked into the whole, future proofing is kind of built into it. So
yes,
that makes sense.
To your point, in the define stage, it's absolutely asking those questions of what else in a year, what else in 2 years that we can consider as part of that design stage. So we may not implement, let's say you're building a 4-bedroom house, but you wanted to add 2 more for whatever reason in a year or 2. Again, your footprint, your structure is all there to support it. So when they're ready to be added, it's an easy thought because it's already been part of the plans.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the bonus room. Bonus space in the attic. I got it. So, all right. So last question. If we're thinking about trends, what's happening, where would you be advising our CEOs to be thinking about technology and what they should be investing in? Let me guess.
Yeah,
that's going to be, is that going to be AI? I'm guessing.
AI.
Yeah.
So,
but specifically, what part of that would you recommend that they're thinking about today, and how should that show up in their leaders list?
So, the term digital transformation has been around for a while, right? But I think it has a lot of good fundamentals in it, and that can apply to AI. So what do I mean by that? For digital transformation to occur, and I've given talks on it and put some thought into it, it has to start from the top, right? And by starting from the top, you're enabling your leaders. So the CEO is enabling leaders to say, I would like you to think about how you can leverage technology for your department, for your processes. When it comes from the top, you're empowering your people to consider and do this versus waiting for them to come to you and tell them when it's become a pain point. And I think it's the same thing with AI. It has to start with the top to enable, your leaders and the whole company to say, you need to be thinking about and considering how do we leverage AI in all that we do to help us be a better company, to give us a competitive advantage, and to go into new frontiers, maybe with our products or services to enable to embed AI in them. And so I think by starting at the top is the key thing. And so today leaders need to be reading about what the possibilities are with AI, not necessarily for them to come up with the solutions for the companies, but just to understand the language and to stay up with the exciting news that's out there. But most importantly is to empower their teams, their departments to say, we want you all to be exploring this, right? Just and coming back with what you recommend. And what I would recommend for leaders is to at least understand what's happening out there. Subscribe to 1 or 2 newsletters. There's a great one out there called The Neuron that you can subscribe to. It's a 5-minute newsletter every day about the latest, like 2 little things on what's happening on AI, and then the new tools that came out. There's another fantastic one called Superhuman. Some can get a little bit technical, but at least they're giving you the highlight news and you start understanding the lingo they're using so that you can also be aligned with your team when you're empowering them and they come back and talk to you about things to be on the same page. But it also, for me, they're exciting newsletters to read because then I get these light bulb moments, say, oh, this is a great tool. I should tell, this team members to explore that and come back to me and say, how do we leverage it in our business? So that would be my counsel to other leaders.
That's great. You brought up enabling leadership teams. And one of the things that we've done a lot and I've seen work really, really well is just a mentoring program to let them start to have consistent awareness and introduction to new things that are happening. Because I think it's really more, when you have something this big, it's a cultural shift.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And so it's literally helping people rewire their brains to understand how this can allow them to make massive change. And so I love that advice.
Thank you. And the message is, this is not to replace your jobs. This is to help you figure out how to do your job maybe better, how to accelerate your ideas so we could do more together as a team.
Sure. New revenue channels, new processes, new things that can be done. It's like, if we only operate in context of fear, we'll never move forward. And the world is moving forward. So there's no way that they can, just keep operating that way. So, Michael, this has been fantastic. We can't thank you enough for being able to invest in the community and help them start to understand how their leaders list can be future-proofed. So thanks
Bryon.
for
I had
your
a great time.